backwards. Okay. And so they adopted uniformitarianism, as did Darwin. And Darwin needed, for at least from his understanding of evolution, he had to have the secret sauce in order for the theory of evolution to thrive and be disseminated, and that was that the Earth was eons old. Without the Earth being eons old, he never could have presented his theory of evolution and natural selection. So once the theory of evolution began to spread throughout the world in academia, and it was considered.
You don't believe in evolution?
No, I don't. I believe that there is biological variation and reproduction, but there's no reason to believe that random mutations can accumulate and build the entire genome of the entire animal kingdom in a one-off universe. Dr.
Not only that, but Darwin's theory, that's all about adaptation too.
Okay, so what people are not taught in school is what the situation is with mutations vis-a-vis the genome. Okay, do you know what the genome is, David?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so for the people listening, the genome is the genetic code of all the different kinds and species of animals. Okay, so people have been led to believe that all you need for evolution, the secret sauce, is you need long periods of time, then you need certain random occurrences such as mutations, and all of those beneficial mutations that would accrue would produce survivability in subsequent generations. That's where we get the idea of survival of the fittest. Okay? Unfortunately, from a mathematical and probabilistic point of view, there's no reason whatsoever, probabilistically that is, to believe that mutations can build the genome. We do observe beneficial mutations, okay? But we don't observe beneficial mutations accrue from scratch, where they produce all new complex anatomy and physiology that never existed before. Okay, so this is a complete leap of faith on the part of evolutionists. Okay, the fossil record is also drastically inconsistent with Darwin's theory of evolution, which people in school and in college are not told about this. Okay?
Wait, so the Bible says the Earth is 10,000 years old.
Actually, the Bible doesn't give a specific date, but if you follow the genealogies, then you're talking about 6,000, 8,000, maybe 10,000 at the outermost. Okay. Yeah. See, so I'll just say this, and if anyone else wants to comment, that's fine. So, because of the paradigm, the model of evolution, okay, in order to accept evolution as true, you first have to adopt that the Earth and the solar system is old. Well, if Darwin had known what we know today in terms of the complexity of the genome, he would have abandoned the theory of evolution altogether. Now, if the genome is as complicated as I'm saying it is and is recognized, then you ask yourselves, well, then why don't all of the scientists and educated people who accept evolution reject it based upon the complexity of the genome? Well, the answer is because they've already decided that evolution happened. Therefore, in their minds, since evolution happened, they are dismissive of the unimaginable improbability of mutations building the entire genome of the animal kingdom. Now, this isn't just Darth Dawkins saying this. Dr. Eugene Koonin, who is a world-renowned expert on evolution and microbiology, wrote a book in defense of evolution called The Logic of Chance. Okay? It's not anti, it's pro. In that book, which is a very difficult book to read, there are certain portions of it I had to go through very quickly because it was too complex for me to understand when he was getting into, molecular things. But I could understand a good amount of it. In that book, he states that a one-off universe happening where evolution happens through random mutations and natural selection is vanishingly small. Okay, that's an idiomatic expression that it's as an extreme astronomical improbability as one could imagine. So at the end of the book in the appendix, he says that a multiverse will guarantee, and when he says a multi or a megaverse, he's just not talking about billions of universes. He's talking about an unimaginable, incalculable number of universes. A megaverse will guarantee that a few one-off universes will produce evolution. So he has to resort to a metaphysic that is not scientific at all, okay, in order to actually defend that mutations could build a genome. Okay?
Yeah, but so I don't see how dinosaurs were like only 10,000, 6,000 years old. If they were,
well, that's because, in all due respect to you, and you don't sound very stupid to me, that's all you've ever been told. The fossil record, including dinosaur bones, okay, are inconsistent with the theory of evolution. The theory of evolution, as presented by Darwin, was called gradualism. The fossil record is completely at odds with gradualism. Okay, that's why certain paleontologists have come up with alternate theories of evolution, such as punctuated equilibrium, that evolution happens in such rapid bursts it leaves behind no fossilized remains. If the fossil record actually supported gradualism, there would be no need for top experts to come up with an alternative explanation. Now, the one thing that people don't learn is they can't distinguish, because either a lack of interest or a lack of due diligence investigating this. It's very difficult to distinguish between what is fact versus what is a evolutionary extrapolation. Okay? So, for example, when they tell you all of the geological ages, that's not necessarily true. Okay? That's a retrodiction based upon the idea of uniformitarianism, as opposed to the various geological layers that are found throughout the world, okay, that which they give an interpretation in terms of the geological ages. Those layers could have happened rapidly rather than slowly. But such a notion that they happen rapidly would be anathema to people who are old earthers. So, for example, let's take the Grand Canyon. If you take a tour of the Grand Canyon, the tour guides will tell you that all of these sedimentary layers formed very slowly over a long period of time. But that's not a fact. That's an extrapolation by someone, either himself or others who taught him, who adopt uniformitarianism, which is
carbon dating.
Well, what about carbon dating?
You don't like carbon dating?
Okay, so carbon dating is a subdivision of radiometric isotope dating. Carbon dating only applies to living things that have ingested carbon-14, okay? And it's based upon the decay rate of carbon-14. So let's first discuss radiometric isotope dating, because that's more appropriate than carbon dating, right? So you take a rock and you discover an isotope of an element in the rock. And what they do is they classify this or label it as a daughter element that decayed allegedly through the rate of half-life decay of any particular element. And then they count backwards to the alleged parent element. Okay? But what they don't tell you about radiometric isotope dating is they first have to assume that the rock is eons old first in order to do this type of calculation. So that's circular reasoning. Okay? So if young Earth creationism is true, counting backwards from isotopes will lead to an incorrect calculation and extrapolation to an alleged parent element. Okay? So when people commit circular reasoning, they're rarely aware of it, or their belief in the system is so deeply ingrained that they just ignore the circularity of it because they're so committed or wedded to the theory or the paradigm. Okay? It's a form of confirmation bias.
What did you say?
I said it's a form of confirmation bias that they have. People, let me give an example. Okay, I take it you're not a Muslim, right?
No, I don't believe in anything.
He's atheist.
Okay. Okay. All right. So I'm not an atheist. I'm a fundamentalist Christian. But you and I probably would agree that if you try to reason with Muslims from either from your perspective or my perspective, that Islam is false, that Muhammad was false, there's a problem that is affecting the vast majority of Muslims called groupthink. Okay? And groupthink is when you are surrounded ethnically, nationally, or even through your ancestry by this groupthink. It encompasses you from the past and the present and your culture, your nationality. Okay? And so if somebody presents significant defeaters to whatever the groupthink supports, and in this case, it would be, let's say, Muhammad being the prophet or the truth of Islam, it's going to be very difficult for a person unless they're ruthlessly investigating the truth, okay, and want to follow the truth of what the nature of reality is. They're going to be severely influenced by their own fault, by the nature of groupthink. Okay, so groupthink at times can be a good thing, and other times it can be a bad thing. Right? I'm sure you would agree with that, right?
Yeah, Sean was telling me about the Muslims on here.
Okay, so I'm not trying to pick on the Muslims. I'm just using this as an example when somebody is influenced by groupthink. Groupthink can even afflict people who are highly intelligent and highly educated.
Yeah.
It's not limited to people who are stupid, or uneducated, brain damaged, or registered Democrats. It can affect even smart people as well. Okay? And so the theory of evolution that's been presented, that's spread throughout the world since Darwin, Big Bang cosmology, the majority of people adopt this not because they've done their own due diligence to examine both evidence and arguments in favor and those against, but because they have succumbed to groupthink, or what we call in science consensus. And people think, well, if all of these really, really, really smart scientists believe that the universe is old, the earth is old, and we evolved from evolution, a person's judgment as to the scientific credibility is going to be severely compromised and influenced by the groupthink, which is referred to as consensus within a particular group, such as science. Okay? So let me give you an example of where groupthink will lead even a internationally known intelligent scientist to say something that is clearly not scientific but presents it as science.
Well, that goes for anything, even if it's not scientific. Any type of groupthink would lead anyone to say.
I agree with you, but I'm just saying that groupthink can affect scientific thinking as well. So, David, do you know who Neil deGrasse Tyson is?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, Neil deGrasse Tyson is an atheist, and he's also an astronomer. He took over the role that kind of Carl Sagan played years ago. You may or may not know who Sagan was.
Yeah, I know that.
Neil deGrasse Tyson has been asked over and over and over again in speaking engagement, what is the most profound thing that you have learned as a scientist? Okay, now remember, the question is contextualized in science. And his response was that we are stardust. And then he has a smile on his face every time, and he says, I'm not being poetic here. The elements in our body are the...
I remember that.
Okay, good. So you're going to like this. So he says, and I'm paraphrasing, so he says, the higher elements in our body are stardust that exploded from stars that exploded and then formed into planets again. Now, what he bases that on is the idea of cosmic evolution, which starts off with a complete rejection of creationism, okay, or a young fiat creation. So what it does is it adopts the paradigm that the universe is old and that it's purely of a materialistic and mechanistic descent, and the idea that it is designed or created is considered suspect until quote unquote demonstrated otherwise. So they base this idea on the notion of what is called stellar nucleosynthesis, which is just a fancy word meaning that higher elements form in stars due to intense heat and pressure. Now, lower elements on the periodic table are more plausibly formed through intense heat and pressure, but the higher you go up in terms of complex elements, their ability to intellectually and scientifically defend that becomes much more and more difficult. But they, in spite of that difficulty, they adopt it anyway because they tend to be materialist, or even if they believe in God, they have been influenced by groupthink from the materialists who've already adopted cosmic evolution. Stellar nucleosynthesis may be true, but that in and of itself doesn't demonstrate that the higher elements in our body were forged in the furnaces of stars, as opposed to that they are the product of a young fiat creation. Okay?
Right.
So this is the problem. People who succumb to groupthink rarely understand or are willing to investigate as to whether they are victims of groupthink. They don't think they're victimized. How often do people who are in cults realize they're in cults? Unless
I mean, to a degree, Christianity is a good thing. You know what I mean? Every religion is a good thing.
okay, well, groupthink in and of
You can always
itself
go
is
to the Bible, though, because it don't matter
Hold
what
on.
it says something.
All
You
right,
can
hold
go
on a
to
second.
something.
Groupthink is in and of itself not inherently good or bad. It depends upon the context. But nobody can deny that the Big Bang model of cosmology has been spread throughout the world and in Western civilization, not simply by scientific education, but by groupthink. Okay?
But I would argue that it's because of the physical validation and objective truth holds more weight than anything else.
I'm going to show how you have been the victim of groupthink right now. Tell me, do you think that the Big Bang is a discovery?
Yeah.
Really? How was it discovered?
Because we discovered how to calculate it.
Okay, and how was that?
Math.
And what's that?
Math. By using, the speed of light and everything else.
No. Okay, first of all, we don't know what the speed of light is. Okay, one way.
But
You can't.
but for now, what we can see is that it's all moving at a
David, has anyone measured the speed of light one way? No, they haven't. So the speed of light is calculated in a round trip. Now, do you know that the speed of light could be 600,000 kilometers per second? The speed of light could be instantaneous from its source to another location, and then on return trip, it could be 600,000 kilometers per second. And then when you divide the round trip in half, you get 300,000 kilometers per second. So the point is this. We do not know what the speed of light is in one direction, but I can even grant to you that the speed of light as we experience is 300,000 kilometers per second. But from that extrapolation, it's not necessarily the case that the speed of light is the same in deep space. Okay, so for example, the speed of light could be affected by certain aspects of physics that are unique to a solar system galaxy. Okay, that slow the speed of light down. Okay. So, for example, you could have a car engine that is operating at certain RPMs, and then when you put on the brakes or the emergency brake, the car is going to slow down, but the car is still operating at a certain RPM. Okay, so the point is this: these scientists they're not being careful. Okay, what happens is in the history of the development of science, is that paradigms come and go, and they spread through consensus and groupthink, and they can have a powerful hold on our mind, and they're not necessarily true. Most other people understand more about certain scientific models, but they don't understand the history and the philosophy of science. And if more people understood the history and the philosophy of science, then they would be less susceptible to groupthink or an appeal to consensus. Okay? So, for example, have you ever heard of the Higgs boson? Okay, or the Higgs field?
No.
These are subatomic states or particles that are said to be the basis of what provides mass for particles, what gives them mass. Okay, it was theorized 25 years ago, and through modern experiments, it has been seemingly confirmed. Okay, so there's widespread acceptance on that. Okay, so consensus can be a good thing. It also can be a bad thing. Okay, depending on the true nature of things.
The God. Sorry.
Yeah. It's nicknamed the God particle. Okay, so the point is this: is that let's say 50 years ago, no one even ever thought of the Higgs field, okay, or the Higgs particle, okay. So that there are certain things that are true. Let me put it this way: suppose that I'll give you a scenario. Scientists theorize at a very fundamental level. Particles are the product of certain states of fluctuating quantum energy. Okay? What if it's the case that in a realm of quantum energy, some of which is particles and some of which is just fluctuating quantum energy, but would just be there, but it wouldn't be particles in space around us in a solar system or galaxy, actually had some impact on the speed of light. And as you move out from a solar system or galaxy, there wouldn't be fluctuating quantum energy, okay, where light could be free to move at its true speed, okay? Now, I'm not saying that's true. I'm saying
you're arguing that the speed of light is inconsistent.
No, I didn't say that. The speed of light, okay, the speed of light seems to be constant in our uniform experience. Now, if you talk to people who are real experts in physics, okay, even those who are atheists, they will tell you that not only do we not know, but it could be the case that physics operates differently outside of our uniform experience. So it might be the case that certain things at a quantum level, okay, within our uniform experience can have an effect where light cannot travel, let's say, at unimaginable speeds, but in this environment, this local environment in our solar system or galaxy, that it can reduce the speed of light to 300,000 kilometers per second. But outside that realm, it can operate at unimaginable speeds. Okay? The point is this. People believe that the speed, let me just say one more thing. People believe that the speed of light is the same everywhere in the universe because it seems to be constant in our local place. But that extrapolation isn't justified. It isn't necessarily true. And that is what they base the age of the universe on in terms of the most distant viewed stars. But now the James Webb Space Telescope, in the star systems or galaxies that they are now seeing in vast distance away that they think are the oldest, they have been dumbfounded in what they're seeing because they did not expect them to be in such complex formation because it's inconsistent with the standard model. That's why they call it the standard model. It's not a discovery. It is a model. Okay?
Can I ask you something, Darth, whenever you have a break?
Yeah. Well, I'd like to answer. Yeah, hold on a second, Jimmy. I'd like to answer it, but Jimmy, you know how much I passionately hate you, Jimmy.
Yeah, Jimmy? And somehow that just, I'm not going to lose any sleep over that, Darth.
Okay, but doesn't that show you their own psychosis, their own Darth-Dawkins derangement syndrome? That all of them concurred that I passionately hate you, Jimmy.
You know, there was somebody popped into the on stage right after that was said, and there was a couple of amen and yeah and all this kind of stuff. But there was one young lady, I think her name was Joanne or Joanna. She was the outlier of that. She says, Jimmy, I think she just kind of felt bad or something. She says, "No, Darth does not hate you. Don't listen to these people, Darth." And I'm thinking, it's really kind of weird that they just kind of like, "Oh, he's going to pretend like he's your buddy, he's your friend, but I tell you, because you're an atheist and he's a Christian, he hates you. He doesn't think,
Jimmy, they're right. Listen, Jimmy, they're right. I'm scamming you. I passionately hate you.
Oh, that's fine. Okay.
I know. I'm scamming you, Jimmy.
But just for the record,
Yes.
I still think highly of you. I don't think any less of you. You can hate me all you want.
You see, I got you fooled, Jimmy.
That's fine.
I know.
I'm good.
Okay. Yeah.
I got a thought question for you.
Okay. Well, hold on a second. I think Stro wanted to say something. If you don't mind, David.
J.
Go ahead, Stro.
Yeah. No, I was just saying. Just a quick Google search, you can see that they found that if light passes through a non-vacuum to a vacuum medium, it will change the speed. That's the only way. Well, that they recorded. There's other, I'm sure there's other ways, but depending on the medium that the light's traveling at, it will change the speed. So, it makes sense.
So this,
if you try to reverse engineer,
even Einstein included the speed of light as a constant, as a fudge factor. Okay, but they don't tell the general public these sorts of things, do they? Go ahead, Jimmy.
Thank you. So here's my question. Here's a thought question. Okay, if we wake up tomorrow and we find out that it's absolutely, positively been shown that the Big Bang Theory is wrong, every credible scientist on this planet said, "Oh crap, we gotta throw out the whole Big Bang." If that were to happen, what are your thoughts about the consequence of that? Do you think that people therefore should adopt to the Christianity worldview?
No, those who are refusing to acknowledge God as creator will continue to do so, regardless of any new apparent discoveries. Okay, so before the observation of the redshift of the cosmic background radiation, the standard model was called the steady state theory, that the universe has always existed. With the observation of the redshift of the cosmic radiation.
Wait, is that really you in the picture?
No, that's Richard Dawkins.
Oh, okay. I was
Richard Dawkins is a world famous atheist and evolutionist. It's just a parody picture.
Yeah, I used to watch some of his videos. I just never seen him like that.
Well, I photoshopped his face into a helmet, so.
Okay.
It took me several hours to get it right because I wanted to look real. So. Okay, so Jimmy, the steady state was the prevailing standard model within cosmology. Once this new observation came about, which led them to, I think, reasonably conclude that the universe is expanding in all directions, which is consistent with the Big Bang model, and it's also consistent with creationism, that let me just go back. Before the observation of the redshift, I believe, there was a French priest, I think his name was Lamartre, right? And I might be botching the pronunciation, but he posited the notion of the Big Bang. And it was initially rejected and derided and ridiculed. And one of the reasons why certain cosmologists rejected it, because they felt that it would give a leg in or a basis for creationism, that the universe began to exist like the Bible said it did. So originally the Big Bang was a a label or a title of derision and mockery and scorn. But then, as the paradigm shift from the steady state to the Big Bang cosmology, that derision went away and they switched paradigms or they switched models. Okay? But ever since the modern science, going back in the 19th century, more and more scientists wanted to give God the middle fingers and not acknowledge him as the creator in pursuit of their investigation of the physical world. Okay? So they decided to worship creation rather than to acknowledge God as creator. And hence, that is why we have, the popularity of evolution and cosmic evolution. The standard model is just a
regional correlation of religion is, right? The person presenting that is saying, there's such a strong regional correlation between,
related to cosmic evolution. But even if they were to observe something that was inconsistent with the standard model, they'll just come up with some special pleading or some ad hoc explanation and just modify it. They're certainly not going to acknowledge God as creator.
I feel like as further we get in science, the further away Jesus and God and all that becomes. Like,
that's categorically false. I think what you're confusing is the difference between science and materialism, okay, or empiricism. Okay? There's nothing in science, real hard science, that mitigates against the Bible, God, or even creationism. Now, you might say, oh, well, we'll look at carbon dating or radiometric isotope dating. I already told you why this doesn't pose a problem, because it's based upon circular reasoning. And it appealed to the Big Bang. You say, well, it's science. Well, it's not a discovery, it's a model. The model is incompatible with creationism, okay? But it doesn't pose a problem, it's just a competing model, okay? If the Big Bang cosmology is true, then young Earth creationism will be false. It's just a contradictory model, that's all. So anything else, Jimmy?
No, thank you. I appreciate it. You answered my question thoroughly. I just wanted your thoughts and opinion on that. But something that you said earlier about the stellar synthesis. I've heard the term before.
Stellar nucleosynthesis.
Nucleosynthesis. Yeah, I've heard about that. But what I found interesting in your perspective is the fact that, according to what little bit of research that I've done, and just sporadic as a layperson, I'm not a scientist or anything like that, but from my understanding, the general consensus of cosmologists is that looking at the CMB and doing whatever kind of observation.
Jimmy, stop. Jimmy, you have to explain the CMB. You have to explain what that means. They don't know what that means.
Oh, cosmic microwave background.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so the general consensus is that the very first elements of the whole entire universe was hydrogen, helium, a little bit of lithium, and trace amount of beryllium. And anything heavier than 4, then it absolutely had to come from the core of stars. But
that's a completely materialistic extrapolation, posing as science.
Right, and that's what I find. So I just want to make clear what your position is. Your position is that in the beginning there was carbon, there was oxygen, there was iron, there was all the other elements.
No, I disagree with that. Because I hold to a rigorous defense of the Christian worldview, and that the mind of God and His revelation stands authoritatively over any accumulation or consensus of educated scientists. It says, in the beginning, God said, let there be light. And then God made the earth first. Then after that, He made the sun. And then after that, He created all of the stellar bodies. Okay, so creationism, okay, as a model of reality, as a worldview, is incompatible with the popular model within cosmology today, which is rooted in materialism, okay, which is an ideology, not science. Now, there may be people who do believe in God who adopt the standard model, but they're only doing so because largely out of consensus. But the standard model is rooted in the complete repudiation and non-acceptance of the previous paradigm that was in Western civilization, was of young Earth creationism for the most part. So it is materialism hiding behind certain so-called scientific research. It's masquerading as science.
Okay, so let me wait a minute. Either I'm misquoted on scripture or something I'm not understanding what you just said. So I just want to clarify this. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth.
Yeah, that's a generalization.
And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters, and God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. So the earth was actually before light.
Well, let me pull this up first on my computer, okay? Hello?
Hello.
Okay, so what I misstated was that light was created on the first day. Okay, I said that it was created first. Okay, what I should have said was created on the first day. Okay.
I was thinking maybe that I may have misinterpreted because
I misspoke. Okay, light was created first on day one, along with the earth. Okay.
Yeah, because I was always under the impression that God created the earth in the dark.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was.
Okay.
Now, first of all, sometimes when we talk about things, we don't always mention it in chronological order, although it may be first things and then second things. So technically, you could be correct here. It could be that the Earth was formed first. It's just telling us what was created on the first day, and what is mentioned first is the Earth, and then there was light. Now, if you want to be technical about it, then I would say that if you wanted to, I don't want to say stickler because that isn't a good answer. I think that you would be in a better position to argue that the Earth was first, then light. But the way it's reading, it's not necessarily that way. It could have been light first, then the Earth. But I would just say that you would have the upper hand if you insisted that the Earth was there first.
Okay, so let's extrapolate this because to me, yeah, it's trivial. Honestly, it is. But what I find more interesting is whenever you read a couple more verses, what I find really bizarre is the fact that this planet, Earth, was populated with vegetation, not in the dark, but before our sun existed. I find that remarkable.
Well, why is that remarkable?
I didn't say okay. What I find remarkable in my definition of remarkable, it's just noteworthy. It's just kind of because of the simple fact that.
Well, are you assuming that the light that God created on day one wasn't bombarding the earth?
No. I'm not saying, because I think I just said also, it's not to say that the earth was populated with vegetation in the dark. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying just on a pure, because like day 3, if I'm not mistaken, I'm going back on memory, on day 3 was vegetation. Day 4 was the sun.
Right. So God, on day 1, God created light. What is light? Light is photons in transit. So when God created light, okay, it would be the case there would be photons in transit that probably was taking place until it was replaced to the photons in transit from the sun.
Right. And
But even if it was the case that God did not create light on day one, okay, and let's say He created on day 4, that would not produce a problem at all.
no, I'm not trying to say, well, your whole ideology was false.
Let me ask you this question.
Right.
Suppose you have plants in a room, okay, really nice, expensive plants.
Actually, I do.
Okay, cool. So, I mean, let's say you have plants that require photosynthesis, and they're in a room with that window, but the lights that you have in your room, help with producing photosynthesis. And let's say you go on a day trip for a day or two. Okay, when you come back and you turn on the lights, are they going to be dead?
No, because they store energy whenever there was.
Okay.
Light.
All right. So none of this poses a problem. Okay.
No, I'm right. But I just think, I don't know. To me, it's fascinating to put it in that particular order. I'm not saying there's a problem. I'm not saying that disproves the whole entire scripture or anything. I just find it really remarkable in the true definition of what I consider as a definition of remarkable. It's remarkable.
David, could you tell me why your atheism is reasonable? Maybe he's AFK. Jimmy, would you like to tell us? Yeah, can you tell us why your atheism is reasonable?
I don't see, there's 1,000 different religions. So I don't see how, one holds more weight and more bearing than another, you know? If there's a Muslim religion, then they would try to...
Well, I agree with you in part that what we have in common is I have a Christian theistic worldview, you have an atheistic worldview, and you and I reject all these other worldviews, with the exception is you include a rejection of the Christian theism, but I differ from you because I reject your atheism. Okay, so it doesn't follow that all these other religions conflict with each other, okay? Nor if all the religions were somehow problematic, or they were unworthy of believing in, it still wouldn't necessarily get you to the position that there is not an eternal creator. So do you have any other line of reasoning why there is not a creator?
There is no reason to believe in a creator. Not objectively.
Okay.
There's no objective truth or objective facts to lead to that, you know?
Right.
There's books and there's faith and there's you could believe and you could have faith in all that stuff.
You know what you just did? You know what you just did? You actually smuggled in atheism when you said that. Okay, and I'm going to explain why. Okay, there's two possible worlds. There's the God world and the not God world. I'm sure we agree on that, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so when I say possible, I'm talking about conceptually. Okay, I'm not talking about metaphysically or logically. Okay, but in a thought experiment, okay, there's only two possible worlds. There's the God world and the not God world. Now, you are operating from the not God world. I am operating from the God world. You reject the God world because you say there's not a good reason to believe in it, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have a good reason to believe that the not God world is true?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, we have science, we have everything backing up everything that we say, we have, you can go to labs. Science, you can take you to a lab and you can get results.
David, science cannot even account for its foundational pillars. So science cannot tell you.
That's good. I don't think. If you look for science.
Yeah, you need to get closer to. Hey, Jay, you need to get closer to your microphone. Okay?
Yeah.
An appeal to science doesn't get you to atheism. There's nothing in science that will get you to atheism. And I could successfully argue that from a metaphysical point of view, you're going to need an ultimate reference point, such as the nature of God, without which you're not going to be able to argue the tenability of science. But that's a slightly different issue. Okay, so an appeal to science does not get you to grounding the not God world. Okay.
I mean, it does because, like you said, the Bible says the world's not that old, and if you follow like everything that science is telling you, it's telling you.
David, okay. Are all conclusions in science provisional?
For the most part.
Okay, so a provisional conclusion is something that is adopted and accepted as though it is true, but it could turn out to be false tomorrow. Okay? Now, even if the Big Bang cosmology were true, if I were to grant that to you, it still wouldn't get you that you're in a not God world. Okay? There's nothing in science that will give you an ipso facto basis that there's no creator. Okay? So appealing to science is a no-go. It will not get you a rationally defensible case that what is fundamental to everything is a creator. Okay? Now,
But you're arguing for a general deity. You're not arguing like for your specific.
No. When I first came in, I was explaining to you how the world reveals God. But I'm not arguing for a general deity. I can and I do and I will defend the Christian God. But when I'm dealing with somebody who's an atheist, I'm starting with the basic concept of God. And then when they realize that they no longer have the option, I'm expanding further that God can only be the Christian God. I'm not arguing. Here's what I'm not doing. I'm not arguing that God probably exists, okay, as a generic concept, and then saying that God is probably the Christian God, okay? Now, I could stipulate that it's the Christian God versus atheism if you want. If you want to do that, I can do that. But the point is this: we're dealing with the creator-creature distinction, right? Now, I think it's worthless to argue for a creator or the creator-creature distinction that doesn't have the character set of the God of the Bible as the preconditions of everything. But the point is this, right? When I present to you the case for the creator and that creator is a Christian God, I want to do so where you no longer have the option to shake your head no by an appeal to atheism being reasonable. Okay? I am not saying that if I can defeat your rational basis for atheism, therefore God. Okay? Okay? I'm arguing that God exists by virtue that he as the eternal, has revealed himself in temporal states, that all temporal states are indicative and revelatory of the eternal, and they could only do so if the eternal was an agent, a personal being, and had the character set that only the Christian God has in order to make temporal things be indicative of him. Your position, on the other hand, is that nothing is indicative and revelatory of God, which the mere non-acceptance of that is an implicit counterclaim. So I will ask you this question. If it's your view that all temporal states are not indicative of God being the ultimate or the eternal, are these temporal states, hold on one second. I'm sorry, I was distracted. If you're going to reject that temporal states, dogs, cats, trees, rocks, stars, are not necessarily indicative of the eternal, okay? What are they indicative of? Are they indicative of I don't know? Or are they indicative of something that is eternal that's not God? Or they're not indicative of anything that is eternal? Which is your position?
I think that we don't. I would say we don't know, but I'd say we do know that it's not a God.
Good. Then you're going to have to make a case for that, because it's very peculiar when you say
Because science always changes, like as we learn more things, we learn Pluto's not a planet, so it's no longer a planet.
Well, here's the problem, okay? In a Christian theistic worldview, you're in a closed system where some things can happen and some things cannot, because it is against God's plan. If you reject that, you are opting for an open system. So what you believe today is scientific truth, could be overturned tomorrow, and is therefore not necessarily true. So you cannot appeal to science per se as an argument against the existence of God, okay? Because you're in an open system, okay? So do you understand the nature between a closed and an open system?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that makes it more...
In an open system, all truth claims within science are provisional. They could be falsified tomorrow, right, David?
Yes.
So whatever you might hypothetically appeal to within science that you think is a defeater against God, it would still be provisional, and it could turn out to be false tomorrow. Therefore, it's not necessarily a defeater for God. So you no longer have the option of appealing to anything in science as a defeater for God. And by the way, you haven't appealed, and
we have the option to rule out. We have the option to rule out things.
Well, not
we can narrow things down, and we can get close to the reality and the truth of certain things.
No, you can't. Here's the problem. Okay, you're either in a closed or an open system. In a closed system, such as the creator-creature distinction within Christian theism, okay, some things can be ruled out because of God's mind and His plan. Okay, but you're not in a closed system, right? You're in an open system, right?
Yes.
Okay, so in an open system, what you rule out today could be completely falsified tomorrow. So you see, you have a problem of what is called underdetermination in the philosophy of science. Okay, you don't have.
I see it as learning from your mistakes and growing.
Okay, David, I don't think you understand what I'm presenting to you. You are in an open system, which means nothing is impossible. Okay, and therefore, whatever you believe today that you are going to use as a defeater or a falsifier for anything could turn out to be false tomorrow in an open system. Do you agree that that's your position?
Yeah.
Okay, then you can't use anything in science as a defeater for God.
Well, not only that, but your morals will change too. Your morals can change, and it can change for...
Right, but I tend not to go down that. I tend not to go down that path, because there's a more powerful way of reasoning with believers. So far, you said God doesn't exist because there are different conflicting religions. That does not get you to a logically necessary defeater that there's not a creator. You made a generalized appeal to science, none of which is an actual logical necessary defeater for God. Okay? So far, you haven't presented anything that's a defeater for God. Okay? Now, the age of the universe. Okay, now the age of the universe, even if I agree with you that the universe is old, that doesn't get you that there's no creator. Now, your position started off was God does not exist because I don't have a good reason to believe in God. Okay, but let me just explain something. You switched from saying God does not exist because I don't have a good reason to believe in Him. You switched it then that science is a defeater for God. So which is it?
The reason why I don't have a reason to believe in God is because of everything else, like science.
Okay. Well, what specifically in science is a defeater for God?
Well, I mean, if you're talking about God in general,
What specifically in science is logically necessitates that there is not an eternal creator?
everything. What do you mean? It's impossible to be able to be a deity and fly around. Like that's not reality. That's not the world that we live in.
Okay, well here's a
Just
problem.
like there's not water in the ocean, in the universe. There's not water floating around in a vacuum of space because that's just not the reality we live in.
David, are you in an open system?
I guess.
Okay, in an open system, nothing is impossible. Do you see the problem?
No. There's a small probability of a bunch of things, but I believe that the universe is grand. I think there's other universes. I think that it's way beyond than just like thinking of a deity. It's like way bigger.
David, appealing to conjecture, okay, or appealing to what you merely believe doesn't get you to a logically necessary defeater. So here's the problem, okay? You do not believe you're in a closed system, okay? You're in an open system where anything you believe today could be falsified tomorrow. Consequently, therefore, then nothing is impossible. So therefore, you lose the ability to talk about impossibility. Do you understand that problem?
I don't think he's understanding the scope of what you mean when you say nothing's impossible, Darth.
It means anything can happen.
Could Darth, in your view, could Darth walk outside his house right now, jump to the moon, give it a slap, and knock it out of orbit, and then land back on the Earth and, come back to talking with us? Is that possible?
I would say no, bro.
Well, if it's not possible, but you believe in an open system, because what you believe today could be falsified tomorrow, David.
No, like I'm saying, like on a small scale, like it's not going to be crazy different. Like if we figure out that it's not 13.8 billion years old, and we figure out we get better technology, and now we know, okay, it's not 13.8, now it's 13.800,000 years old, and 732. Like you get it down to a T, the more you advance.
This has nothing to do with our conversation. Once you concede that you're in an open system, that what you believe today, whatever you believe today could be falsified tomorrow. Let me put it in the form of a question. Whatever you believe today, could it be falsified tomorrow by a new observation or examination of the data?
I don't know.
Well, the answer is that's why all conclusions in science are provisional. Okay, that things are only accepted provisionally. Okay, so unless you believe that you are in a God world where God represents a closed system, then you're going to be in an open system. And in an open system, what you provisionally believe today could be falsified tomorrow. Okay, so you can't say anything is impossible. Because if you are, you're going to have to tell me what ultimately exists that dictates all states of affairs and makes some things impossible. Is there something that is ultimate that dictates all states of affairs and makes some things impossible? Does such an ultimate thing exist, David?
Hold on, somebody's talking. Can you repeat that?
Is there something that is ultimate from which all other states derive and depend that will dictate what is impossible?
I don't know.
Okay, well then you lose your ability to say anything's impossible. You may believe it, but you may believe it without justification. but you lose your ability to say anything is impossible with logical necessity. All right, I'll be back in 15 seconds. I got to get my headset. Okay, go ahead. Okay.
Yeah, I'm just saying science has more validation, than what you're arguing is like a belief and like faith.
David, are all conclusions in science provisional?
I would argue everything related to the Bible is false.
We're not discussing, David. We're talking about how your atheism is reasonable. Okay. Your position is twofold, okay? And you stop me at any time. And by the way, I really appreciate your cordiality, okay? You're being a really good guy, even though we disagree, okay? Your first line of reasoning is you don't have a good reason to believe in God, therefore the not God world. Well, such a position is an appeal to ignorance fallacy, okay? Secondly, you're saying science in some way shows that there's no creator, okay? First of all, there's nothing in science that dictates that. But even if you could appeal to something with specificity within science that you feel is a defeater for the existence of God, it would still constitute a provisional conclusion. And if it's provisional, it's not necessarily true. So this is a very simple question. It's not a trick question. Are all conclusions in science provisional? Well, the answer is yes, it is. You can't appeal to a provisional conclusion.
Well, there's things we don't know. There's things we don't know, like what caused the Big Bang, what made the universe happen. We don't know.
Atheism is not the mere absence of a positive belief or lacktheism. Atheism constitutes the direct or indirect denial of God. Okay? Now, people who verbalize they merely lack belief in God, what they don't realize is they are denying God implicitly and indirect. So even saying, well, I'm not asserting there's no God, I just don't believe in one, or I lack belief, even upon such a statement as that, I can show them that they are implicitly or covertly denying God. Okay? The bottom line is this. You can't appeal to provisional conclusions in science as a logical necessity that shows that God doesn't exist. That's a fallacy in reason.
What if?
Okay?
Well, Darth, if I may ask you a question.
Sure, go ahead.
Logically, if the universe always existed, would that imply that there was never a creator God?
Well, one of the characteristics of the creator-creature distinction, that is God, is that he is eternal and he alone is eternal. If you could demonstrate, which you couldn't, but if you could, that there was something else that was eternal other than God, then God would no longer be God. He might be some entity that existed from eternity alongside something else and might have certain characteristics, but he wouldn't be God, because definitionally God is alone eternal. Now here's the problem. If you're going to assert that something or anything at all is eternal, on what basis do you ground that? Because in Christian theism, in biblical Christianity, we invoke and we defend that God is and that he's eternal because he takes the initiative to reveal himself in creation and through human history, without which we couldn't stipulate and defend that God is and that he's eternal. So if you're going to put on the table that there's something else that is eternal, either to the exclusion of God or in addition to God, where he would no longer be God, but just an entity, then you're going to need to tell me how you're putting this eternal thing on the table. Can you do that?
Sure. So take, for example,
you just agreed that if the universe existed, then we can logically exclude a creator God.
You said if. You need to.
Yeah,
You
that's
stipulating.
yeah.
Okay. I'm not trying to be rude. I'm not interested in if, maybe, could be, might be. Is there something that is eternal that you're putting on the table?
Me personally, yes. I think that the universe exists in a block state eternally. That if you were to zoom out all the way, it never changes.
Okay. Well, I take it that that's a figment of your imagination. Can you show me otherwise?
Sure. I mean, I can give reason to suggest otherwise. That is to say, I have reason to think it could be the case. That's what you mean.
Since I take it that that's a figment of your imagination, I want you to present a rationale that's logically necessary, okay, in some way or in some sense, that something is eternal that's not God.
Sure. Well, and you already, I think we both can agree that this is universal among my peers or colleagues that if that an infinite regress, for example, no bueno. Like that idea doesn't mesh well naturalistically. Although it's possible, there are theories out there to suggest that could be the case. I think you and I agree with that.
Why? Let me ask you this: why do you reject an infinite regress?
To me, it's I think that it adds unnecessary variables, an infinite number of them.
Okay, so here's the problem, okay? I still need you to give me specificity and with logical necessity that something is eternal. Can you do that?
Sure. So with specificity, I think that the universe itself is eternal. That you and I, in fact, are also eternal in that sense. Everything always is eternal, always is.
And how is that not a figment of your imagination?
Well, one reason that we have to think that might be the case is because
you're guessing?
No, I'm not guessing, inferring.
Have you observed the universe eternally? Have you been there observing eternally?
Well, I said inferring. I didn't say that I was proving or demonstrating.
Well, your mission, hold on a second, your mission, should you choose to accept it, you need to give me a rationale that has some type of logical necessity that there's something eternal. Okay?
Well, I agree that there needs to be something eternal. We both did. Like, we don't like infinite regress. There's other things that we don't like.
You're evading your job here. Your job right now, I will shut up. You need to present to me some type of rationale that comes with logical necessity, rational necessity, okay, as to what is eternal, okay? How do you establish that something is eternal? Did the eternal reveal itself to you, Caleb?
Does it have order, Caleb? The eternal that you speak of?
No, like I said, I think it's an inference, because if the past, present, and future exist in simultaneity, then we really have two options. Hold on, I'm almost done, I promise. I'm almost done with this. There's only the two options, as far as I can tell, and here's my rational, logical reason for this. If that is the case, that we live in a superpositional time-space state like that, either it always exists in this state statically forever, or it randomly pops into existence at some point. To me, I think that there are fewer assumptions to be made, and I think it's also intuitionally obvious that the former is more likely than the latter.
Okay, so
it's just more likely to have always been there.
Right, so you're appealing to abduction then, is that correct?
Perhaps. I'm honestly not entirely sure.
Well, you said intuition is Darth.
Okay, well, that intuition is not rationally based, okay? So the bottom line is you haven't presented me. Okay, Caleb, I'm not trying to be rude. You seem to be a nice guy, but I'm going to reiterate.
I'm not trying to be rude either. He made a statement, so what I said was entirely. No, I know it, but I gave other reasons.
Yeah, I'm fine with you. You're cool. Unlike most people like you.
I'll shut up.
No, you don't have to shut up. Okay, it's not a problem. What I'm just saying is, So far, you haven't provided a rationale, okay, that has some type of rational necessity that there's something eternal. Okay, and I'm still waiting for it.
Okay, well, my rationale. Maybe, okay, I thought I had, but maybe you can explain to me how it's not a rationale to have those two options in front of me and realize that one has to propose the assumption.
Because you're just posing a hypothetical. Because you're in an open system. Okay.
Well, that's fair enough, but I'm presenting all the available options given these paradigms. So even if I were to do this with your paradigms, I still have to weigh all possible options within that paradigm, right?
Caleb, of all the temporal states that exist, is it impossible for those temporal states to have popped into existence from nothing, independent of eternity?
See, again, I can't say that I can know that.
Okay, well then,
if you're in a closed system, doesn't that mean like if I'm a Muslim, that's a closed system? Does that mean it's right? It doesn't like guarantee nothing.
Well, that's a Muslim who claims they're in a closed system is like a transvestite who claims they're a woman. Okay, so you see, Muhammad bastardized Christianity, and it's easily shown. Okay, the God of Islam does not have all great-making properties, right? So he can't be a perfect God, because you're going to need to have a perfect God in order to secure ultimately human intelligibility. Okay, so although Muslims will mimic the type of apologetic that I'm presenting, it ultimately fails because Muhammad was just making it up as he goes along, and we can show the elementary philosophical mistakes that he made along with glaring theological mistakes. Okay? Now, to hardened unbelievers, they're just going to go, oh, well, the Bible is problematic. Well, we can discuss that. But the bottom line is the issue here is what is the rational basis that there is no God? Because if I'm going to attempt to try to persuade you to believe in God and that God is the God of the Bible, ultimately in Jesus Christ, okay, I first make a brief case for his revelation in human in nature and through human history, which of course you reject. But then the moment you reject that, you are presenting an alternative worldview. So then I'm going to show you that your alternative worldview or any other worldview, which is in the same category of yours in the not God world, is, upon examination, completely absurd. And so what it's going to expose is that you're practicing, all unbelievers are practicing resistant non-belief versus just non-resistant non-belief because they don't have any bullet points that are rationally defensible that there is no God. So far, with all due respect to you gentlemen, you haven't provided a rationally defensible bullet point that there is no creator. Okay, so do you have one? Do you have one?
Sure. Well, you take this from a very different approach. So you go from God or not God, whereas I think you can start further back than that. I think you can start from stuff or no stuff, right? Like you seem to think that nothing is the default position.
No. Okay.
Well, this is a difference in our paradigm. Like you start from God or not God, I start from stuff or not stuff.
Okay. All right. You're making a category error. Okay.
Okay.
The law of excluded middle says something is either A or not A. So if I fill in a value for A, okay, either my shoes are entirely yellow or not, such a statement is necessarily true. Okay? Now, when you say nothing, that would be within the realm of the not God world. Okay? So there is not a third option in terms of the law of excluded middle.
Well, see, I think you're making a category error because when I say something and nothing, you say nothing is not God, ergo something is God. I don't agree with that as logical.
I don't think you're understanding the law of excluded middle. Okay? Anything that's expressed within the law of excluded middle is necessarily true. Okay? If I said to you, either there is water on earth or there is not water on earth, that statement is necessarily true. Do you agree?
Sure.
Okay, so any predication or propositional statements, whatever they may be, will either be invoked within the context of the God world or not. What I've just expressed to you, again, is the law of excluded middle, and I've just simply filled in a value for A, and it will be necessarily true. Your position is my statement is not necessarily true, which means you are violating the law of excluded middle.
No, because what I'm saying is essentially you're with me to a certain point. Obviously, if nothing exists, or not God exists, as you put it, then the water in the lake thing makes sense. But if something exists, there's water in that lake, so we can make that statement.
Nothing would be in a not God world.
Sure, but something exists, right? So I think the disconnect here is that, for whatever reason, something equals God in your mind, where something could equal any number of things for me.
Okay, Caleb, I'm not trying to be rude, okay, but do you have any sense that you're misunderstanding what I'm saying?
Well, I know what you're saying. You're saying that you can, and you can
listen, I'm really not trying to be rude, okay? No, you're not understanding what I'm saying to you, okay? It's not registering, okay? The law of excluded middle is the third law of logic, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Now, is the law of logic, when a value is filled in for A, that something is either A or not A, is such a statement formulated that way, is such a statement necessarily true?
I would say, yeah. A, not A. Yeah, I agree.
Okay, now, if I say either whatever is invoked is within the God world or not, that statement is necessarily true. Okay? If you accept the law of excluded middle, you are required rationally to accept what I stated, because all I've done is filled in a value for A. If you reject what I am saying, you are being irrational, because you are accepting one representation of a law of excluded middle and not another. But substantively, they are the same. Okay? So the point is this: either we are in the God world or not. Okay? So whenever you would invoke, okay, it'll be one in both worlds. Now the bottom line is this: are you an atheist?
I am, so I say we're not in the God world. So how does the logic thing from
explain to me your rational defense that the not God world is true.
I think that the not God world is true because I think it's more likely that I believe this. I believe that the not God world is true because I believe that it is more likely that all of everything just always existed rather than that a God has been created.
That's not a rational defense. And first of all, you've committed a category error, okay? Probabilities and likelihood are subject to context, background information.
Yeah, you have to rationalize my belief.
Caleb, I'm not trying to be rude or be pretentious. I think I'm coming across to you that I know a little bit about this subject, okay? Now, if you're going to invoke probabilities or possibilities, probabilities and possibilities are subject to background information. Do you accept that? Okay. Now, background information is going to have to consist in terms of what fundamentally does not change alongside with what does change. The way we would express that in other terms is what is static and dynamic. Okay? So probabilities and probabilities require the background information of what is static and dynamic. Okay? Now, when we're talking about the God world versus the not God world, We're talking about what it is at its most fundamental state, okay? Whatever is at its most fundamental state in terms of the God or the not God world, in order to speak of either one about probabilities, requires the background information. So you can't apply a probabilistic analysis of one world, versus the other. It is a category error. If I said to you, it is more likely than not there is not a deer in my backyard, or it's probable that there's a field mouse in my yard, that is because you have background information as to what's static and dynamic. When we're talking about a comprehensive composite worldview, okay, whatever is fundamental to each world, if at all, is not subject to a probabilistic assessment. So when it comes to God, saying God probably exists or probably doesn't is a category error in philosophy.
Can I say something?
I wasn't doing philosophy. I was explaining to you why I believe a thing.
Okay, listen to me. You were doing philosophy. Everybody does philosophy.
No, not in that moment. I was answering your question.
Caleb, you're not understanding this. Caleb, yes, you are, because even children, when they talk, when a child says to another child, the toy is underneath the bed, or that's not mine, give it to me.
There are philosophical reasons for what I was saying and doing. That's
Caleb, I'm going to stop arguing with you because you're not understanding. Okay, or it may be that you don't. Okay, no. Caleb, either you aren't understanding or you don't want to understanding. You're making a fallacy of reason and philosophy. Let me ask you this, Caleb. Maybe
I was if I was presenting some sort of lecture on the topic, but I was just answering a question about my belief.
Okay, so what I'm asking you is not simply for you to tell me what is your mental state. I'm asking you to provide me with a logically necessary defense that the not God world is true. Telling me your mental state is not a justification that the not God world is true.
Well, to be fair, all I can do within my paradigm is present to you the reasons why I think it's all I can do.
Can I say something?
That's all I can do. So, whereas in your world, you want to say that
of course, David, this is your room, David.
But by reasons, he doesn't mean a rational justification.
Yeah. Go ahead, David.
Well, I just feel like because we're on a planet, right? We're on one of many planets, and we found out that our sun is just a star, one of many stars. And then we found out that we're in a galaxy, one of many galaxies. And this is all universally true, you know what I mean? And then we go deeper and we find out we're one of many galaxy clusters, you know what I mean? And then there's like these super galaxy clusters that hold all these galaxies, that hold all these stars, that hold all these planets, and hold all these, other phenomena going on. And you go back further, and then there's the universe. So it just makes more sense that, there's most likely, probably, in my opinion, there's more probability of multiple universes than there is of like a deity that controls this one specific thing, that this one specific made everything perfect, I feel like
David,
yeah.
David, I could grant to you, what if I were to grant to you that there are multiverses or megaverses, that alone itself would not logically necessitate the not God world. There could be multiple universes that were created by God, and if for some strange reason we could come to know that there are multiverses, it wouldn't be a defeater for the existence of God, David. Now, getting back,
I'm thinking of other universes that have different completely elements that wouldn't even stand a chance of survival, and it would be like different rates and different amounts.
David, I'm really not trying to be a contrarian. Even if that were true, it wouldn't be a logically necessary defeater that what is fundamental to everything is a creator. Now, Caleb, I don't think you're understanding this, okay? Giving me a probabilistic rationale is literally a category error. Okay? You and I have two different worldviews. I'm operating and speaking from the God world. You're speaking from the not God world. Okay? When you say it's probable, it means it's not necessarily true. If I tell you there's probably a worm in the dirt in my backyard, okay? Right? There may be a worm in my backyard, but not necessarily. The point is this. Appealing to probabilities doesn't get you to a rationally, logically necessary defense that there is no God. And it's also, and listen very carefully, I'm not being, sly on this. It is a category. Okay, Caleb, can I ask you a question? What does green taste like?
It doesn't. But my problem with this is
David,
you have no problem with
David, why? David, why doesn't green taste like something?
It's just the color.
Okay, it's a category error, right, Caleb?
Sure.
Okay, when you talk about saying God probably exists or God probably doesn't exist, this is a category error.
Well, let me ask it this way. I'll use your example, right? Is it some sort of category error to say that there is probably a worm in my backyard?
No.
And to believe that there is, in fact, a worm in my backyard based on that probability alone, not because I've done some investigation.
Okay, David, let's just get to the point here, okay? You are just being resistant, okay, and you refuse to accept your category error. Listen, okay, excuse me, Caleb, I misspoke. My apologies. Caleb, you are categorically, no pun intended, making a category error, okay? God or not God, as an all-encompassing realm, necessarily exists. One of them necessarily exists. Neither one of those realms, okay, God or not God, are subject to probabilities as an entire realm.
I don't find this language very helpful, though, because it is also necessarily the case that either everything always existed or it didn't always exist, and we can play this language game in that direction.
All right, Caleb, I'm done. I can't help you anymore. I've walked you through why you are literally making a category error. You cannot.
I said you don't understand this.
Okay, can you stop over talking to me? No, actually, I think I've demonstrated that I have a mastery over the subject, which you do not. And what you're doing.
Well, then what's wrong with my one example that you used that I used that?
Listen,
what's wrong with that example?
Can you stop ignoring? All right, I'm just going to ignore you from the here on out because you know what you're doing right now. Okay,
using your own example against you.
Okay, listen to me carefully, okay? There are two things in debates and in public speeches called the heckler's veto and the prevaricator's veto, okay? The heckler's veto is where somebody is speaking or two people are having a dialogue, but somebody else or even one of the two parties just starts over-talking and it's just being a contrarian rather than debate. There's also the prevaricator's veto where somebody just keeps on dodging the legitimate questions or evaluations that are put before them. You are doing both right now, so it's pointless continuing with you. Okay? I really feel that way. I really don't feel like I've been dodging any of your questions. No, Caleb, listen, I'm not trying to slight your intelligence. You seem to be an intelligent man, but you are playing dodgeball and you're playing the contrarian game. You can't apply the category of probability to a complete model of reality because God or not God, either one or the other, let me just rephrase this. They both cannot coexist. One of them necessarily exists, okay?
Sure.
So it would mean
you had a 100% probability. I think this is not useful because you can apply probability to everything.
Listen to me.
I'm just trying to get to question, man. You've been on some really long diatribe.
Okay, Caleb, it's a waste of time talking to you. What you are doing right now is a tactic that is deployed at the cafeteria table in high school. You're just bickering with me. You don't know what you're talking about. maybe if you were a little bit more modest, you would accept the fact that a probabilistic assessment of God or not God realms is a category error. I'll tell you one more time, and this is the last time I'm going to explain it to you. Okay? God or not God, either one of them, whichever one is correct, they necessarily exist. Their necessary existence is not subject to probabilities or contingencies. It is a category error. Okay? Mm-hmm. Now, I've explained this to you over and over again. Bickering with me isn't going to make you look good, and it's not going to impress me. We need to move on for you to give up this category error because it's a fool's errand. You cannot say that something that is potentially a necessary state, okay, that it probably does or does not exist. If something necessarily exists, it's not subject to a contingent realm, okay? Understand?
Universe. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. You're done. Keep going.
All right. Okay. So, saying that God probably doesn't exist is a fail, and I don't mean any disrespect to you. It's a complete fail as a rational defense that God does not exist, or the God world doesn't exist. Do you have any other rational defense that the God world does not exist?
Before I start talking about other things, because first, it is necessarily the case that either everything always existed or it didn't always exist. Right? I can play these sort of language games too. Okay, can I get my 2 cents up? I let you go for quite some time. I have 2 points to make, and then I'm going to necessarily true. That was point 1.
Or is it probably true? Is that probably true?
That was point 1. I let you go for some time.
Is that necessarily true, what you just said?
Yes, it is necessarily the case.
Well, I say it's probably true, just like you do.
And I say, about my second prompt, what I was going to say, is that any and everything can be assessed in probabilistic terms. I don't know why you would say that this is some sort of a problem. If the thing is absolutely 100% the case, it's 100% probable, so be it. But you can still address these things and understand them using probabilistic language and using probabilistic ways to get there.
Let me tell you why you can't. Okay.
And that's all I'm going to say. So go ahead. Go on your next one.
I'm going to tell you, it's not a diatribe. You see, I'm systematically taking apart what you're saying, and because you have the gift of gab and you're accustomed to bickering, you think that that's debate. Now, okay, in order for you to...
I was trying to have a real conversation, but I am interrupting this time, and I'll admit it. I was trying to have a real conversation with you, and you're trying to say we're debating now.
Caleb, I'm going to ask you a question right now. How old are you?
I'm 32.
Okay. You are literally acting like an obnoxious 16-year-old.
Yeah, and I apologize. Look, I did say I was going to interrupt that time because that one really got to me. But I'll shut up now. I'll name my mic.
Caleb, I'm going to ask you a very simple question. And being that you are a grown man, you're fully capable of understanding this. Okay? Now, probabilistic assessment, as you have already agreed to, requires background information. That background information is going to have to consist of what is static and dynamic. Now, if something is static and or dynamic, it will consist of what is, what can be, and what cannot be. Let me repeat that so it's clear. The background information for probabilistic assessment, okay, since you want to do some probabilistic assessment, is in terms of background information of what is static and dynamic, which you have agreed to. What is static and dynamic refers to what is, what can be, and what cannot be. Now, what I've just said to you is not controversial.
Darth, can you use specific examples for the audience, like the ping pong ball example?
Well, I'll get to that momentarily, okay? So when you make a probabilistic assessment at any time, you're talking about what is, what can be, and cannot be, okay? There's 3 things. What is, what can be, and what cannot be. Now, I want to ask you a very simple question. What fundamentally in the totality of all things dictates what is, can be, and cannot be?
Okay. I don't honestly know if I fully understand or comprehend.
I'll go over it again if you like.
Let me just say this real quick, because I'll be brief.
Because I'm not. Okay, be brief, but we're not going to change what I just said.
Sure. I'm not going to try to change. I'm going to try to address it and see if it answers you. I'll answer that it's similar to the best of my ability, I think.
Not gonna lie, I didn't understand.
Yeah, so I think that one thing, if we're looking for something that's dynamic static, that we can use to defer to make these probabilistic statements, I think that what I am describing as the block universe is that thing. We can make relative comparisons to this static, unchanging thing.
Okay,
That's what
Caleb. Okay, Caleb, I would like an answer to my question. Do you have something that is singular and concrete as opposed to abstract, that is identifiable and defensible as to what dictates what is, what can be, and cannot be?
See, I don't know what is, cannot be. I have no idea. I honestly, I have to admit, on this one, I don't know.
Okay. So, since you don't know what, if anything, dictates what is, can be, and cannot be, you no longer are in a position to make any probabilistic declarations whatsoever, because you don't have any background information. Well, okay.
Maybe
I think it's just the way you word things.
Okay. The bottom line is this. Okay.
I think I can answer this a little better than after
David. Listen to me. Do you have any sense at all that you're making any mistakes?
Do you mean me, or were you actually talking to David?
Excuse not David. I keep on doing it because I'm tired. Excuse me, Caleb. Do you have any?
Well, sure. Yeah, I'm just a layman, so that wouldn't be the least bit surprised.
Okay. Then I don't know. Maybe you're in the habit of enjoying just bickering and arguing with people. But I already explained to you. You're making. Listen to me. Human beings all the time, we talk about facts. Okay, you do, I do, children do it. Facts are framework dependent. Facts are context specific. Okay? Even when children talk about facts, they're context specific. Okay? In order to talk about facts, one must have some philosophy of what constitutes factness. Even children, even little children, have a crude or even a primitive sense of a philosophy of factness, although they wouldn't use that terminology. So facts required a philosophy of facts, and a philosophy of factness requires a model of reality as to what fundamentally dictates what is, can be, and cannot be. Now, you have just admitted that you have nothing identifiable or defensible as to what dictates anything at all. Did you concede? What fundamentally and singularly dictates what is, can be, and cannot be?
All right. Well, first I want to address this baby point real quick here, because it's kind of bizarre to me.
Can you please address my question instead of?
I am addressing your question. If I can have just a second, man. Do you realize how long-winded you are? Are you aware of this?
Well, that's because I know the subject and you don't.
Well, perhaps, but I mean, really, man, you're going to go on for quite some time. You got to give me more than at least 5 seconds.
I'll give you as much time as you want, but I want you to specifically address the question instead of segueing down a rabbit trail.
A rabbit trail that you brought? If it's a rabbit trail, then you're the one that brought up the rabbit trail.
All right,
we're talking about something that you brought up.
Wait, can I say something?
Hold on, real quick. Caleb, I said David. Caleb, listen to me. I'm going to shut up in 10 seconds, okay? You can say whatever you want. But after you're done speaking, I am done dealing with you. You obviously are giving off oppositional behavior disorder here.
You're giving money oppositional behavior.
No, you are bickering. You are ignoring what I am saying to you. You don't know what you're
I'm not ignoring it, and you're giving me shit for trying to not ignore it.
We're done. It's your turn. I'm done with you.
Anyway, the thing that I'm trying to not ignore with this baby stuff, it sounds essentially, at the end of the day, if you're going to say that they're doing philosophy, then any and all ways of knowing and coming to know things is philosophy. And if you're going to say that I have no philosophy because I'm an atheist and that I have no philosophy that leads me to believe these things, then you just haven't been paying attention. Because I've been giving you reasons. If babies have philosophy, then everything that I've been saying is philosophy. And I'll be done talking with you because I honestly think that you're being ridiculously aggressive and you're just trying to talk me down for some reason. You're not trying to engage. I was trying to talk to you like a human being a little while ago, and you were giving me crap about that. And you're like, no, I'm trying to debate. I'm like, okay, well, I'll up the ante a bit. And so we'll have a bit more of a confrontational style, and then you want to complain that I'm being confrontational. Come on, brother. Be a little bit more self-aware.
Are you done?
Yeah, no, I'm finished.
Hey, Caleb,
It's obvious what's going on here. Go ahead, David. This is your room.
I was saying, he was saying, I think, I don't know, I just feel like for an atheist, for saying probability, I think it'd be more open-minded towards your side, you know? It's not like
Atheists don't have ability to grant.
Yeah, it falls into agnostic. It falls into agnostic.
It doesn't matter. It's either one. When you don't, you can't talk about probabilities and logically and rationally defend them when you're in an open system where anything can happen. Okay? Probabilities require that which is static, that will not change, along with things that do change. If there's nothing...
Look at it this way. I think it's
30 seconds.
Yeah.
Give me 30 seconds, okay? If you don't have something that is identifiable, that institutes and secures what is static, then anything can happen at any time. Okay? Nothing is off limits. And if nothing is off limits, you cannot make probabilistic assessments. Why? Because probabilism requires that some things can't happen or don't change alongside other things that do. In an open system, as opposed to a closed system, right? Anything goes, anything can happen. And if anything can happen, probabilistic assessments are meaningless. They don't apply.
Okay. But I would argue that my version of my perspective of open system is not that, like, anything could happen and that, like, something could change.
Right. Let's explore that.
It would be...
to see.
Yeah, it would be, my perception would be that the universe is consistent, like how you would think a closed system would be, but we're learning.
System. David, are you in an open?
The universe is consistent as the way it is, but we are learning because we're not that smart. We're barely learning. You know what I mean?
David, I'm not talking about the universe per se. I'm talking about the set of all real things. Okay. Now, for you, the universe may be the set of all real things, or it could be that the universe is a part of the set of all real things. Either way, it's not important. What I am asking you is this: either you're in and I'm simplifying these concepts. Okay, either you are conceptually going to acknowledge you are in a closed system or in an open system. A closed system is one that some things cannot happen. And the reason why some things cannot happen is that whatever it is fundamental to the system prohibits some things from happening while allowing other things. The open system is anything can happen. Okay? Now, in that sense, it'd be a closed system. In the Christian theistic worldview, it is a closed system where the mind, the purpose, and the plan of God through Jesus Christ makes that some things can happen and some things can't happen. Now, you told me earlier you were in an open system. Are you now telling me you're in a closed system?
By the definition that I'm hearing, I feel like it'd be a closed system. It would be a closed system.
Now, in order to establish that you're in a closed system, you're going to have to tell me fundamentally what it is that dictates what cannot happen. Can you do that?
Yeah, you can't walk on water.
No, okay. I'm asking you fundamentally what does that?
That is the fundamental.
Oh, okay.
Based
Okay,
on
so,
physics,
okay, so is it your position that the laws of physics are that which are eternal and unchanging and invariant?
yes.
Okay, and by what means were you able to establish that?
By science.
No, that's completely false. Science has no stipulation. You're not going to find any real scientific papers that argue that physics are eternal, because that is beyond the scope of science. Okay.
Well, the universe is universally conserved with like majority of like what is it, oxygen, like O2, nitrogen. There's like 2 or 3 main components that generate across the entire universe.
Okay, David.
And that's eternal, and that's always going to be there.
What's eternal? Well, wait a minute. You objected to anything being eternal earlier in the conversation.
It's eternal in terms like it's going to be here until the very end. From the beginning to end, it's always going to be here.
Okay, no, David.
And the way the universe is expanding is, I feel like, okay, go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
All right, David. What is categorized as eternal is that which has no beginning. It doesn't begin to exist. Okay? And it will not end.
Okay, it's not eternal.
Now, right. So, the point is this. Science has to presuppose certain foundational pillars that they cannot rationally